Welcome back. Now, the prevalence of malaria in South Africa is endemic, and in certain areas of the country is very much so. Now, however, the good malaria control efforts have been put in place, and the disease is now restricted to certain districts in northeastern KwaZulu-Natal, parts of eastern Mpumalanga and eastern Limpopo. And these areas have conditions that are actually suitable for malaria transmission. So, to eliminate cross-border malaria in southern Africa, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis and Malaria awarded Mosaswa, referring to Mozambique, South Africa and Eswatini, a grant in 2017. And following the successful completion of the original grant, the grant has now been extended for a further 3 years until December 2022. And to tell us more about it, I'm joined now by Sherwin Charles, who is the co-founder of Goodbye Malaria. Thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you so much, Sakina.
So let's talk about the situation first, cross-border and malaria controls in the region. How bad is it?
I think you've always heard it being said that mosquitoes know no boundaries. And I think the big challenge for Eswatini and South Africa is certainly what we call imported cases of malaria. Cases of malaria where the transmission has happened in another country and the person has fallen ill and traveled. And thus in South Africa and in Eswatini, you've seen a lot of these imported cases of malaria. Quite a high percentage of the cases seen in South Africa is certainly coming from across the border. Mozambique really being the country with the highest number of cases in the region. In last year, we had over 10 million cases of malaria in Mozambique.
And that's a staggering number of people to be infected. How does that compare with South Africa and Eswatini?
Well, Eswatini is the closest in the region to elimination. They've had less than 50 cases of malaria. So really, we've seen a huge decrease. In 2017, there was a spike where we had 21 people dying in Eswatini from malaria with over 400 cases. That was quickly brought under control by them implementing indoor residual spraying and a test and treat program. In South Africa, we've just had around 18,000 cases of malaria, so a vast difference when compared to our neighbors, Mozambique. But what we found is that we do have local transmission in South Africa. So in Limpopo, in Mpumalanga, in northern KZN, we are seeing cases of malaria that are from local transmission. So within the region, people are the reservoir. We do have the mosquitoes that transmit malaria, and that's a huge problem for us right now.
I'm still struggling with getting my head around the 10 million infections in Mozambique. That's a lot. So what is going on in Mozambique whereby they are seemingly unable to stem the tide?
I think they are winning the war against the disease. If you look at the provinces where we now operate, in Maputo province, which is one of the areas that Goodbye Malaria operates in, we've seen a reduction of malaria in the last 5 years by more than 75%. In fact, in Maputo province right now, we're quite confident that we would get to pre-elimination within this grant that's just been launched. We've also started working in the province of Gaza as well as in Yamban, where the incidence is much higher, and we believe that the work that we would do, we would reduce malaria in the coming 3 years. That will be of huge assistance to South Africa and Eswatini.
And that, of course, speaks to this grant that has now been extended. And ultimately, of course, the objective is to eliminate malaria altogether. But how has progress been with regard to the grant funding that you've received?
I think the Global Fund had taken a bold step to support this initiative. It was great that the three governments, Mozambique, South Africa and Swaziland, got together to say that we need to ensure that we have alignment in our programs, in the insecticides we use, in the advocacy that we put out, and to ensure that the communities that live along the border areas are free of malaria. And I think that the difference for this grant was that it's given to a public-private partnership principal recipient. We've put in private sector principals, we've brought in innovative funding, we use a lot of technology, really at the forefront of seeing how we can get to zero. In Maputo province, as I said, we've seen the cases of malaria really drop drastically since we started. So when the program started, we had over 300,000 cases of malaria. We're down to less than 50,000. That's been huge progress. On the back of that progress, we've now seen a grant that has expanded by a multiple of 4. The grant is now $30 million. And that money now will be used to tackle not just Maputo province, but Gaza and Inhambane, as I've said. The program will protect over 2.5 million people per year over the next 3 years. And so we think that in Maputo province, by 2022, we would be pretty close to what is defined as pre-elimination, meaning you're very close to zero and local transmission not happening in the area.
But you know, when we talk money, we always get jittery about, you know, fraud and corruption and all those sorts of issues. $30 million is a lot of money. What sort of measures do you have in place to ensure that it actually does go towards its intended objective and it reaches the people who actually need it?
So the first grant that the Global Fund allocated to us was for $9.7 million. And the grant is pretty unusual in itself. So the grant was made up of Goodbye Malaria contributing to the Global Fund $4 million, which was part of the 9.8 million that came to us. And the same happens in the second grant. So part of the grant, $5.5 million is coming from Goodbye Malaria, $20 million is coming from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the Global Fund is putting in $6 million on their side. What you find is that the first grant being just completed now in 2019, the grant has been rated. It's been rated as an A1 grant, meaning that there's been no corruption. We've stuck to the objectives of the grant, and we've met and exceeded all of the measurements that was meant to be there. In terms of corruption, the grant is monitored by what we call the principal recipient. We have our own internal controls. We have our own auditors that oversee the grant. More so, the Global Fund has a local auditing firm that acts effectively as an internal audit to the grant that checks on every step of the way what we do. So they form part of your management meetings, they audit you on a regular basis. Over and above, the Global Fund's auditors also looking at it. The Global Fund has an incredibly strict process, tough governance rules, where they have line of sight to the cash as well on a daily basis. So should there be any corruption, the grants are stopped, Global Fund takes immediate action. It's pretty difficult to have money, disappear out of a grant. So I think that if we just keep the processes we've had in the past, we've had no issue of corruption, we've had no issue of misappropriation of funds. I think we're pretty confident that the governance and the processes that we have ensure that the money does go to where its intended use is.
Well, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much for stopping by. Sherwin Charles, co-founder of Goodbye Malaria, and the grant we're talking about is to combat AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria in Mozambique, South Africa and Eswatini, and it's been extended for a further 3 years until December 2022. Let's take a break.
Thanks, Akina.